Welcome to Intuitive Transformations with your host, Sylvia Henderson, and discover tools, wisdom, and inspiration that will empower you to transform your life. Sylvia is an intuitive life coach and energy healer with a growing practice that is focused on empowering others to be more of who they want to be. For the next hour, join Sylvia and explore and unravel anything in the way of you creating the life that you would love to live on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intuitive Transformations radio show, the show where you will find tools you can use to change and transform your life right here on OMTimes Radio FM, the voice of consciousness. I'm Sylvia Henderson, your host. I'm an energy healer and an intuitive life coach. And to learn more about me and the work that I do, feel free to visit my website at intuitivetransformations.net. That's intuitivetransformations.net. And please, while you're there, sign up for my newsletter and use the Facebook link at the bottom of my website so that we can connect that way as well. Well, today is Sunday, May 1st, 2016, so happy May Day to everyone. And I want to remind you that you can download the replay of today's show starting tomorrow on OMTimes.com, because today's show is going to be one of those shows that provides you with insights into how you can heal your emotions, your life, and your world. We're going to talk about something that everyone has, and that is emotional clutter. And today's guest is going to explain to you all what emotional clutter is, how we collect and accumulate it, and how you can let it go, and all that is blocking you from living a transformed, fulfilling life. Now, the secret is something that we've all heard of, and that secret is something we can all easily access. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's easy to tap into. It's called mindfulness. Now, I know that mindfulness has become a very common term, especially in most spiritual circles. But my guest for today offers a wide array of many unique and novel approaches to mindfulness that you can easily apply and then integrate into your life. And I am certain that you will really appreciate hearing what he has to share. My guest today is Donald Altman. Donald Altman is a practicing psychotherapist and a former Buddhist monk. He is also an award-winning author of several books, including 1 Minute Mindfulness, The Mindfulness Toolbox, and The Mindfulness Code. Donald is an expert on mindful eating and teaches in the neurobiology program at Portland State University. He conducts mindful living and mindful eating workshops and retreats and trains mental health therapists and business people to use mindfulness as a tool for optimizing health and fulfillment in their life. Donald is joining us today from his home in Portland, Oregon, to share wisdom from his brand new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation. Donald Altman, welcome to the show.
Well, hi, Sylvia. It's great to be with you today.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here because I loved your book. It really resonated with me strongly, and I'm excited to share with everyone listening the insights and the wealth of wisdom that you provide there. But before we jump into a conversation about your brand new book, everything about the work that you do and what you have written about highlights the value of mindfulness. So as a psychotherapist and a former Buddhist monk, I have to ask you this. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were you a psychotherapist first or a Buddhist monk first?
I was a Buddhist monk first, and actually that changed my life. And after I had come out of the monastery and was doing work in the mindful eating field with spirit workshops on the spiritual aspects of eating, I was approached by many people asking me about eating disorders that they were having. And I went back to school and became a psychotherapist. So that was the chicken, how the chicken and egg were hatched.
Wow, that's a really interesting journey that you would start off as a Buddhist monk. So, do you still practice Buddhism in your personal life, though?
Yeah, I still practice the meditative practices, mindfulness. I still talk with some of the monks. And I say, you can take the monk out of the monastery, but you can't take the monastery out of the monk.
Wow.
So I hold it in my heart still.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, Donald, what exactly is emotional clutter? How do we get it, and why do we hold on to it?
Well, emotional clutter, I think your audience will relate to this. Physical clutter you can see,
Hmm.
and it's very obvious. Mental clutter is often invisible. And that's the danger of it, is we often don't know that we're swimming in all this emotional clutter that's filling up our heads, all the anxiety maybe about things yet undone, maybe old childhood trauma that's filling up our heads and making us repeat stories, or maybe it's just the wear and tear, the daily grind of stresses that you have to encounter, and the feeling of overwhelm that you have during the day. So it can come from the past, the future, or even the present moment.
You know, the thing that you pointed out is that it is invisible. So you have this emotional clutter and things are happening in your life, and it's hard to put the dots together because it is so invisible, right?
That's right. And I think one of the ways that you know you have it is if you keep having certain problems that keep repeating in your life, or you feel that you're not centered, or feel that you're not always able to respond in this moment, or get the fulfillment, or enjoy and savor the things that you're experiencing. Like the man I worked with one time, he was on a trip to Hawaii on a vacation. When he came back to see me, and he said, I should have called you. I was on this beautiful beach in Hawaii, and I couldn't enjoy a moment of it because my mind was filled up with all this clutter of all the things that I knew I had to do in the future.
So
Yeah.
another word for emotional clutter could be worry, it sounds like.
Sure, it could be worry, it could be anxiety, it could be rumination, thinking about something in the past that is really sticky and that you continue to think about. Or it could be, for example, something that goes back to your childhood. Like, I wanted to share a quick story about a woman I worked with, and this is fascinating. She came in to see me. She was in her 60s, Sylvia.
Hmm.
And one of the first, and one of the first things she said to me was, my mother, she abused me and mistreated me. And I listened to that, and she told me a little about it. And I said, well, I want to hear more about that. And we'll get back to that story later. Because, of course, in the initial intake, I had a lot of information I wanted to cover. But she kept returning to that particular story. And I finally stopped her, and I said, I'm kind of curious. I've noticed that you've gone back to that story about your mother many times already in our short session. Have you ever counted the number of times you tell yourself that story in the course of a day? And she paused, kind of put her chin in her hand, and looked at me, almost like she went out of a trance, which I think she had. And she said to me, she said, wow, it's funny you asked me that. I have tried to count how many times I tell that story, but I always lose track. And then she said, but I notice that when I don't tell that story, I'm a lot happier. So isn't that a great example also of how clutter can keep us from really optimizing, getting the most out of this moment, and living that fulfilling and joyful life that we all really deserve?
It is a great example because as you were telling the story, it reminds me of, when we had phonographs and record players and you would get a
Mm.
scratch and it would just skip over and it's like you're stuck in a groove and you can't break out of it.
That is a great way of saying it. It really is in terms of brain science, and in the Clearing Emotional Clutter book, I do bring in a lot of brain science ideas. It is very much like you're being stuck in a groove, and if you keep repeating the same story over and over, your brain will actually create a groove, and the neurons that fire together end up wiring together, so they make kind of a rut or a groove, and so it's very easy for someone who has that scratch to replay that old story.
Absolutely. And so, how does emotional clutter impact our physical well being?
Mm. Well, it emotional clutter has a big impact on our physical well-being in a lot of different ways. What we're learning now, which was thought to be impossible, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, is that the thoughts we have can actually change our hundreds of biological processes in the body. That when we're feeling stressed, or when we're dealing with that emotional clutter, it can trigger the release of cortisol and adrenaline. And cortisol in particular is a stress hormone that, if it stays in the body even just 2 or 3 days, creates a chronic stress state. And what that does, Sylvia, is it depresses your immune system. So it puts the brakes on the T cell count. It actually kills what are called NK cells, or natural killer cells. And those are very important cells because they actually fight tumors and some kinds of viruses. So here you are, making yourself more vulnerable. And there have been a lot of research around the idea that when people are unable to manage their stress, they get sicker a lot. They end up missing a lot of work. Worse than that even is they also sometimes take it out on their family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely does have a detrimental impact, especially if they're then taking things out on their family. That also affects their emotional well-being as well.
Oh, absolutely. And taking it out on their family is something I address here about how can you transition in a smoother way? How can you come home from work, which is where a lot of our stresses occur, for example, and come home from work and have what I call a smooth landing and a secure attachment with those people that are with you in your household.
And that's so important to maintain the integrity of the family, to not bring those stressors into your home, and to be able to leave them at your office space. So
Absolutely.
I know we're going to be coming up on a break very soon. And when we get to the other side of that break, I really want to talk in depth about your book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation, and the 4 unique parts and sections of your book that provides wisdom and information. So when we return, everyone, after the break, there'll be more of Sylvia Henderson and Donald Altman. Stay tuned.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
No, the name is Joe. The Joe Show. And we are returning back for our 9th season here on OMTimes Radio. So tune in every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on OMTimes.com/mobile. You can take us wherever you go. Yeah!
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
Clutter. And before we went to the break, I was letting everyone know that we're going to dig now into Donald's new book and talk about the 4 different parts of his book, because every section provides wisdom and information that comes from the world of brain science and also from ancient teachings as well. So, Donald, what I noticed about your book is that every section is designed to help the reader release their emotional clutter on a very deep level. And in reading your book, I felt like you left absolutely no stone unturned. And you really took your time to examine the emotional clutter from many different angles. So there's a great deal of value that I found from your book that I gained. And I think that what you have to offer will help a lot of people who are struggling with their own emotional clutter and even feeling overwhelmed or lost in it. So,
yeah, thank you. And I really wanted to make this book a book that went deeper and would give people a lot of practical tools that they could actually put into play immediately.
Well, you absolutely did that, so I commend you on that. So I want to do, if we can, if hopefully we have time, to really do an overview of each part of your book. And I won't be able to talk about every single chapter, even though every one of them is rich with content and great tools for the reader to be able to implement in their life and use. But your book's divided into 4 parts or sections, as I mentioned. And so the first one is recognizing and clearing away old emotional clutter. And then there's healing relational, cultural, and ancestral clutter. That's a big one for everybody. Preventing new emotional clutter with daily decluttering, and then transformation and fulfillment with peace, purpose, and wholeness. So let's start with part number 1.
Okay.
So I love the chapter, Stop Riding the Emotional Elevator, because this is something that just about everyone who I know, including myself, struggles with on a regular basis. So why do you believe it's so hard to get off that dang elevator?
Well, we're very much emotional beings, and emotions can be helpful, but you can think of your emotions like an elevator that takes you up and down. And a lot of times this elevator can be run by old programs that push your buttons, so to speak, your elevator buttons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something good happens in your life, the elevator goes up. Something bad, even the belief that something is bad, and the elevator can shoot downward. And so this is really about, how could I have more control over the elevator buttons being pushed and not let every little thing, or go chasing after the things that make my elevator go up, trying to get those all the time and grab onto those, or trying to avoid those things that push my elevator down, like maybe a friend doesn't text you or ignores your text, or you don't get that promotion you wanted, or so on. So there's all these things, and even internal thoughts can move us up and down all the time. And so clearing away clutter means that you're more in control of your own elevator. You're able to see it and notice it and get free from that elevator going up and down, which can be very exhausting.
Very exhausting. It's like you're constantly being pulled and pushed around emotionally because of your external experiences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. And those are things over which we often don't have control over, right? So this is a way of recognizing that and kind of learning how to have a sense of equanimity and a sense of calm in spite of all those different ups and downs. It's like being on a boat. And so instead of getting seasick, right, from all the rolling of that boat, up and down movement, we can just stay nice and calm, like on a quiet, calm sea.
Wow, and what a different world we would live in if we could all adopt that.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, it would make a big difference, and we wouldn't jump to a lot of unnecessary conclusions or blame ourselves, or maybe blame others, or take things as personally. You're right.
Yeah, we'd be able to respond instead of react, which would be really lovely.
Right.
So I want you to talk about the importance of acceptance, because that's one of the important keys to being able to stay off of that emotional elevator.
Well, that's true. And again, this goes back to the idea that, everybody is dealt different cards in life, and we don't often have control over those. What we could have control over is our attitude. in the face of those difficulties. And acceptance is a wonderful shift in how you could handle things that happen in life, a loss, or the fact that we all age, or a health issue that we have. And acceptance can really give us a lot of strength and allow us to move forward. So, we're not putting a lot of resistance into fighting what's happening in our life in that moment. For example, I travel a lot around the country and internationally teaching, and there was a big snowstorm in Baltimore not too many weeks ago, and I happened to be caught in that, where when I got off the plane, my luggage didn't come off the carousel. And my mind got very reactive in that moment, Sylvia, but I was able to just notice that. And I think that's what this work does, is instead of just grabbing onto those thoughts and getting all upset, I was able to notice, okay, yeah, there's that reactive thought. And I realized, what can I do? How can I move forward? And my luggage isn't here, and that could create some challenges, but how do I move forward with that? So instead of fighting what had happened, the reality was my luggage didn't come down the carousel. So from a place of acceptance, I was able to respond more effectively.
And that is so important. I'm thinking about a passage I read in a book by Sherry Huber, which is suffering is resisting what is.
Exactly. You can live in the what if, or you can live in the what is.
Yeah.
You can live with the conditions of your life, and that's actually the best place to move forward from. Rather than sticking your head in the sand, avoiding, escaping, pretending it isn't so. And even with the difficult parts of life, I think that living with that and confronting it directly is a positive step.
I think that's a very positive step. We live in a world today where everyone is trying to self-medicate by distracting themselves with something. If it's not a substance, then it's an activity. And so how then can we, instead of reaching for that, use our breath to help clear away our emotional clutter?
I think that our breath is probably one of the most accessible ways of clearing away clutter, and it's portable. It's with us wherever we go, and it doesn't cost anything. If you knew of if your doctor told you that you could take something that would reduce your ruminating, having negative thoughts, that would help increase your immune system, help you relax, and bring your thinking brain back online. Because when we're reactive, we actually shuts off our thinking brain. It's like your hard drive crashes on a computer. But if somebody told you could do all that, and it didn't cost you anything, you didn't have to go to pharmacy to get it, and there were no side effects, would you be willing to try that medication? And the medication is breathing. And I talk in this book about a wonderful meditation practice that the Navy SEALs use. And I actually interviewed a Navy SEAL and was able to get some wonderful insight from him about why they use these breathing techniques. And it works for them, even with people under extreme duress. So the Navy SEAL recruits, when what's happening is that they put them under such duress and increased anxiety and fear that many of them were failing in their initial training, and they thought, we have to find a way to help our recruits and keep their thinking brain online. And so they found out that breathing was wonderful for arousal control. It counteracts the stress response in the body and the brain and helps us think more clearly. It lowers our blood pressure, our pulse rate, our respiration rate, and it even increases alpha brainwaves, which is kind of like when you're calm and in the zone. It even releases serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that brings us into a calm mood state. So here, just taking a few breaths for 30 seconds or a minute can completely shift how you feel.
It really can. And it's not, for those of you who are listening, it's not about gulping in the air. It's really about slowing down the breathing process as well, really breathing all the way down into your diaphragm and releasing with some nice even inhalations and exhalations.
Absolutely. And if I could I actually guide your audience through a couple different ways of getting this breath?
I would love that. We have just about 2 more minutes before the break. And
okay.
I think you could probably do that, at least one of them.
Yeah, sure. So let me, one of the wonderful ways to get the breath into the belly, or, breathing deeper in the lungs, which moves the belly, is to place your arms either at your sides, both palms, like at your lowest rib on the side, or even clasp your hands behind your back, and you're actually opening the rib cage, making it easier to get that longer, deeper breath. And that's probably one of the best ways just to take that a belly breath. If you're breathing higher up in the chest, you're not getting that deeper, longer breath. And you might notice that you're getting a longer breath, that you're inhaling more, and that you're exhaling. Exhale slowly when you do this. And this is just a wonderful practice that you could do even at a stoplight. I call it stoplight meditation for 1 minute.
I absolutely love that. When I used to do massage therapy, I was surprised by how many people were just stuck in that fight or flight response. Mm-hmm. It's just a chronic malady, I think, of today's society.
Oh, yeah. And I think watching a lot of the news that we watch can contribute to feeling that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're coming up on another break, everyone. I just want to remind you that we're talking with Donald Altman, and we're talking about his brand new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation. And when we return after the break, we're going to talk more about this because, Donald, I want to really talk about this healing relational, cultural, and ancestral clutter, and especially the family emotional clutter. So we'll be back in just a few moments. Please stay tuned for more of Intuitive Transformations Radio on OMTimes Radio.
Second break.
Is that half hour?
Yeah, half hour ago.
This is going easy.
She's asked me good questions, and she's actually going through the book.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle. The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Intuitive Transformations Radio. I have with me my special guest, Donald Altman, and we're talking about his brand new book, Clearing Emotional Clutter. And before we went to the break, I told everyone we're going to talk now about family emotional clutter. And this is a really big player in my own personal life because, actually quite a few people, I didn't have that nurturing, supportive family growing up. And it provided a really distorted definition of what love was and what a family looked like for me. So I know that my family experience is a bit extreme. I had a father who was an abusive alcoholic, physically and verbally, and a mother who she passed on when I was 5, but she was also abusive, and she even had some mental issues to a degree. And then a stepmother who was also, I felt a little bit like Cinderella growing up in my life. And so clearing this family emotional clutter is something that I find also in my clients is a big piece that needs to be dealt with in order for them to have more wholeness of themselves in their lives. So Donald, can you talk a little bit about how we can use mindfulness to cleanse the emotional clutter that has been handed down to us from our families?
Well, one thing I want to mention is I admire hearing your story, Sylvia. And I think a lot of people have endured family trauma and emotional clutter. And you're a wonderful example of how we're not fated to have that, get in the way of having fulfilling relationships. So we can learn how to get through that.
Yes,
so that's the first point I want to make.
Thank you, Donald. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. Our families, a lot of the way we think, even it could be related to our families. Like a man I saw one time who he had lost his job. Actually, he had a business that failed, and then he came to see me. He was severely depressed, and one of the first things he said was, he said, I'm kind of like a loser because I couldn't keep my business going, and I don't know how to interview. I can barely use a computer, and the economy's bad. I'll never get another job. So, and I looked at him. I said, "Wow, you've got a lot of great reasons why you can't move forward." And I asked him if he would be willing to make a list, like a top 10 list. Letterman was popular at the time. He had a top 10 list, and this guy thought that was a good idea. So he came back. And I said, let me see your top 10 list. And he pulled out this sheet of paper and he said, well, I'll tell you what it was. The top 10 were, but first he said, I have to tell you something that I looked at this list and I realized this is how my mother thinks.
Wow.
And he had never seen it before, but actually by writing it down and having it in front of him, he saw it. He saw that he had actually adopted a whole way of perceiving life and viewing things negatively and feeling that he couldn't succeed. And he said to me, I'll never forget, he said, I don't want to think like this anymore. And so it was a beautiful, he was so motivated to move forward, and he did, and it was wonderful. But, often we don't see, again, how our family emotional clutter could be affecting us. Now, in some cases, when you have a lot of trauma like you had, and it becomes more obvious, but still, the question is, how can you start to clear that out? And I actually have in the book a way for getting a new download, if you want to call it that, a new brain download of relationship upgrades on how to kind of clear out those old relational patterns that can be very disturbing for people. And so, it's probably a little more than to go through right here, but it's to find people who we have something in the brain called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, again, they help us really feel what other people are feeling. And so we can surround ourselves with people who have had the secure upbringing, who didn't have the abusive parents, right? Mm-hmm. Who have a positive outlook on life. And we can actually get the download from being around those people and attuning with them. And that's something that is very beautiful and very possible, and I've seen it happen.
And I love how you provide a very conscious way to achieve that in your in your book. And everyone listening, I want you to know it's not just that Donald is exposing these issues. He actually provides you with a multi-layered, multifaceted list of tools that you can use. Every chapter he provides a tool that's so easy to implement. I've read many books where people provide tools at the end of the chapters, and oftentimes some of the tools just seem so overwhelming and overbearing, but these tools are so accessible. They're easy for you to implement, and as I'm reading through them and playing with some of them, they're highly effective. I think Donald's done his homework on what works and what doesn't work. So I just wanted to kind of give a plug about that aspect of your book before I move to my next question, Donald.
Oh, thank you.
So you also talk about planting friendship seeds of trust, acceptance, and empathy, which is really important if you've had a childhood of trauma, that you may not know how to find these seeds of trust, acceptance, and empathy. And then if you do, what exactly to do with them. And so can you talk a little bit about how we can plant those seeds, how we can find them, and how we can plant them to produce the fruit of that in our lives?
Yeah, and I want to make one little statement first, Sylvia, which is that how important it is to have friendships and relationships in our lives. And research shows that if you don't have a network of helpful, supportive family and friends, that can be as bad for your health, believe it or not, as being an alcoholic, smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or being obese.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing, isn't it?
We are wired to be in community, in relationship.
Absolutely. So here are some of the ideas that I think are really important with friends, and I talk about cultivating 3 seeds of friendship, which are trust, acceptance, and empathy. And I think what happens is sometimes a lot of people share too much about themselves, and they don't allow time to friendship to develop over time. And I think that's where this idea of trust, listening to your gut, don't rush in and tell too much right off the bat with a new friend, and just allow that trust to grow. And if you do that, then it's like planting a seed. A tree, a little acorn doesn't grow into an oak overnight, right?
Exactly.
And friendship's the same way. The second seed of acceptance is again, there's that acceptance idea that you talked about earlier, and especially with friendship, is not to be too harsh with your friends. I mean, we all have frailties, don't we? Everybody has a blind spot, and that's okay. But we want to notice the frailties of our friends, be able to forgive them when they're not perfect, and also express happiness for our friend, even if what their choice may not be what we would do.
Yeah.
Then there's the last one, the seed of empathy, is about really entering your friend's emotional world. This is where we're talking about reciprocity and mutuality. It's really important that there's a time for sharing what's happening in your life, but also a time when kind of being quiet and hearing what's happening to your friend, right, and listening and opening up to that. And I think that if you can attune with your friends, that will help build that relationship. So I really encourage people to, if you haven't, you've been disappointed with friends, not to give up on that.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because one of the things that you do talk about separately later in the book is compassion. And what I feel this empathy is also closely tied to providing compassion for other people by listening to them and providing that empathetic ear without trying to fix it necessarily as well.
Right. And that's the thing about acceptance, which means we don't have to try to fix somebody else.
Yeah.
There was a sage one time who said, when pulling weeds, pull your own first.
So
right?
important. so important.
Yeah. And that's being kind to our friends too.
Absolutely. And so let's look at part 3 of your book, which is preventing new emotional clutter with daily decluttering. And here you provide great tools to do that, because once you finally got rid of the baggage you've been lugging around for years, how do you then begin to make sure or ensure that the clutter does not return? And so one of the things you talked about, which we kind of touched on briefly earlier, was about distractions, eliminating distractions, and then even vaccinating ourselves against affluenza, which I thought was a great topic to cover.
Yeah, and so I think we're probably more distracted than ever before. You could think about this daily clutter that builds up, kind of like tartar that builds up on your teeth, and you need to, floss that away daily. You need to mentally floss away the distraction that can get to us. And so I think one way to deal with distraction is to sometimes go on especially a distraction that comes from a lot of technology. Technology can be great, but if you don't have any boundaries with it, then it could start to fracture and splinter our attention. And so sometimes I recommend, if that's the case, for people to go on a technology diet, even a little bit. And I even have a mindful expiration of time spent in here, where somebody can actually look at how you're using your time throughout the day and whether or not you need to adjust that. The other thing is vaccinating yourself against affluenza. And I love this whole idea of affluenza, which means that, there's never enough, right? That we always need more. Mm-hmm. And affluenza is described as, and this is from the book Affluenza, they defined it as a painful, contagious, socially transmitted condition of overload, debt, anxiety, and waste, resulting from the dogged pursuit of more. So when is enough enough? When, I think this is also about appreciating what we already have in our life. And if you already, if you are grateful for what's already in your life, you'll never be disappointed. You will also increase the value of things you already have instead of devaluing them and wanting something new all the time.
And in our society today with the media, everyone is constantly bombarded with, buy the new iPhone, buy the new this, buy the new car, buy this, buy that. Yeah. This will make you happy. And the happiness is not in the object. And it's very short-lived, and it's disappointing.
That's right. It's called, you start chasing that. It's called the hedonic treadmill, and you never get satisfied with it.
You never get satisfied at all. So we're going right back into another break, everyone. When we return, more of Donald Altman as we're talking about how to clear the emotional clutter from your life. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour.
Time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business. Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Distractions and vaccinating ourselves against affluenza. And I think we can both agree that more and wanting more is never going to satisfy the soul or the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
in the very, I did want to touch briefly on how we can use nature as a healer for our soul, how that can fill a void within us that affluenza and distractions cannot.
Wow. Tapping into nature, Sylvia, I personally, just one of my favorite practices is just to spend a little bit of time during the day, even for a minute or two, just looking out at the trees or hearing the birds and making that connection. And, think about George Washington Carver. He was the man who many people have described as the Thomas Edison, or I call him the Thomas Edison of the peanut. He had over 300 inventions of the peanut. And somebody once asked him how he did that, that he must be a great scientist. And we know what he said. He said, I go out at 4 a.m. and I sit with the plants in quiet solitude. And I found that if you sit in silence with anything and love it enough, it will share with you all its secrets.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
And so I have found nature at times in my life when I was experiencing challenges and even despair, that the people that sit in nature, that there were lessons. If I was able to be quiet and kind of get the mind, the thinking mind out of the way, nature somehow filled that void and allowed me to go to a new place of healing. So I heartily endorse, and we do know that science even says that if we just spend a few minutes in nature, it even restores our depleted mental energy. If you're burned out or you're feeling mentally exhausted, spend a few minutes looking at nature, and that will actually help you regain your concentration.
I could not agree with you more. You and I are very fortunate. We both live in the Pacific Northwest, which is filled with lots of evergreens and beautiful nature surrounding us. And I tell you, my sanctuary is a beautiful hike in the woods. There's nothing like it to restore your soul, and touching the trees and feeling the earth beneath you. And it's just a beautiful, holy experience for me.
Yeah, and I do have some practices that I describe in the book. One is a sky gazing practice where you actually surrender your worries out to nature, out to something larger. And I think it could be a very transformative and healing practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Holding on to them certainly doesn't help us at all, does it?
Right.
So before we go into discussing the last section of your book, can you please tell everyone how can they get in contact with you? I know you have a couple of websites and a newsletter.
Absolutely. And I really invite people to come to my website, which is mindfulpractices.com, and it's MINDFUL practices.com. And on that homepage, you'll find the Mindful Living newsletter. You can subscribe to it right there. And it's a great way to get some new mindfulness practices, a reflection that you could use daily, some new information in the mindfulness field, and also updates on events that I'll be hosting.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's go on to talk about the last section of your book. And I want to remind everyone, please get this book. Go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you can find a bookseller. It's called Clearing Emotional Clutter, Mindfulness Practices for Letting Go of What's Blocking Your Fulfillment and Transformation. And Donald is also the author of another book he's well known for. It's called 1 Minute Mindfulness, and that might be a really nice companion to read these both together. But in the very last section of your book, which is titled Transformation and Fulfillment with Peace, Purpose, and Wholeness, you talk about Velcro thinking, which I'm sure in everyone's mind they're thinking about something that sticks, versus Teflon thinking, which is something that, sticking doesn't happen. So what is Velcro thinking and Teflon thinking all about?
Well, yeah, Velcro thinking is any time that we get stuck in an old pattern where we're not able to find a fresh perspective, and it could be when you feel that you're right about something, or that somebody else is wrong about something.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, you're not able to be flexible. Where Teflon thinking means you're able to almost like a gymnast. It's very flexible. You're able to move freely, and you're able to flow, and it's a great feeling. It's kind of you're in the flow mentally, emotionally, even physically when you're able to be a Teflon thinker, and it means that you're also able to laugh more, even at life's foibles, or when things don't go your own way. You could have a humorous point of view with it. So it's and it's something you can cultivate and learn how to do.
And I love that, because when you meet someone who has more of that Teflon type thinking, you see that they're pretty easygoing. They kind of go with the flow, and life kind of goes along the flow with them as well. It just seems like things move easier.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that again, it's easy to start to emulate people like that, and I think it's a skill that we actually can learn, which is wonderful, isn't it? To think that we don't have to be all serious about life. And I kind of grew up in a serious family, and I found that we don't have to be stuck in that place, and it brings more joy into your life, actually, if you're a Teflon thinker.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I also like how you point out that the actions of others, people around us, even ourselves, are often driven by wanting either pleasure or wanting to avoid pain. And I have to say, one other thing, I have two sons with autism, so I've worked with a lot of PhD level behaviorists and with ABA therapy with my sons. And the way we modulate their behavior is with the understanding that they are either trying to avoid pain, escape behavior, or attain pleasure. So as you point this out in your book, how we grasp for what is desirable, but we push away what is undesirable, and we create this emotional suffering. But you offer a way out of it using the power of pausing, naming, accepting, and releasing. So can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, that's a very important skill that instead of grabbing on to the negative feeling, and I actually have an example in the book of somebody who work contacts them at on Sunday, and they're about to go to a yoga class, and instead of and I have two scenarios of that where they grab onto that knot or that emotional negativity, and it stays with them, or they're able to experience it, name the emotion that they're feeling. They're feeling frustrated, they're feeling upset, able to release that, and then move toward joy. And it's a very powerful, just to read that part of the book, I think it can help people understand when they're getting caught, almost like in a, almost hooked by, like a fish, is getting hooked by that lure. And how easy it is to get hooked, but also how to unhook ourselves.
And what I like is that you do need to let go of that hook first in order for that sense of freedom and more pleasure to open up, because even in our neurology, pain and pleasure, they travel along the same neurological pathways. So they share the same railroad track pretty much.
Well, and what I think of what I try to do and help people with in Clearing Emotional Clutter is to get them to step off the train if that train is leading you in an unhappy or unhealthy direction. And so the idea here is that, if you're having anxious thoughts, for example, and you get on that thought train, I like people to think, well, where do I go if I stay on that train? It might lead me to Anxietyville or Dwellsville. I might have an anxiety attack down there. Or I can learn through breathing, through different practices of labeling and naming, and even just, taking a breath to step off the train and get back on the platform.
That makes a huge difference. That freedom of choice is huge.
Yes.
If we can be mindful enough to pause, to recognize and understand and know that, yes, we really do have freedom, and it's that freedom of choice.
Key part of mindfulness is that, that intentionality, that choicefulness that really makes life worth living. It's our free will. It determines our future.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're coming up on the end of the show. This has gone so quickly. Donald, this has been wonderful having you with us.
Oh, well, thank you, Sylvia. I really enjoyed it, and bless you for the work you're doing, and bless your audience, too.
Thank you so very much. If there's one thing you could share with the audience that you could leave them with, or that you would hope that they would get from your book, what would that be?
I would say that it would give them hope and give them tools and help them feel that they're not stuck and there's a way out of the emotional clutter.
That's huge because, I know that there are a lot of people out there that the emotional clutter is not one or two things. They really have a closet or even a whole house full of it.
Oh, yeah.
And not really even sure how to get out of it because they have been using some things that haven't worked, like distraction or affluenza even, and not realizing that what they just need to do is pause, take a moment, and be mindful with who they are and what's going on inside.
Yeah, and I've appreciated you giving me the opportunity to talk about it here and to share these, which I think are very powerful ideas for helping people live the life they want.
I couldn't agree more. Donald, thank you. I bless you, and I'm so grateful for the work you're putting out in the world. The world needs it, and everyone listening, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a wonderful May Day. Know that you are deeply loved and that life has your back. Take care now and see you again next week. Bye-bye.